My name is Amy Chan. I came in 1999 to do my master's in music here. Worked with Jim Cotter and Deborah Crisp. Then went on to do a PhD in music. Worked under Stephen Wild, and that was a shared supervision between the School of Music and Faculty of Asian Studies. My PhD was on roughly identity politics and intercultural music in Malaysia and Singapore. I am the Southeast Asian specialist in the Menzies Library at ANU. It started out with my master's research paper, and that was basically inspired by Jim Cotter, who asked me basically, why don't you just work on some Asian composers, for example? And so I started working on Toru Takemitsu, or Takemitsu Toru, as for my master's thesis. And that got quite interesting, and in fact I got hooked on research. But I wasn't quite satisfied with the approach that I had taken, because I thought that I should take on a bit more anthropological perspective and deal with those sorts of cross-cultural issues which I did not get to deal with in the master's. And that's how I ended up doing identity politics. Initially, in my discussion with my then supervisors, Dr. Stephen Wild, we talked about looking at Southeast Asia because that's where my area of interest was. We talked about Indonesia and Philippines, but at that point of time, the socio environment was not conducive for a single Chinese woman to be doing fieldwork there, and that's why we ended up doing Malaysia and Singapore. And when you're doing anything on Malaysia and Singapore, there's always the issues of politics, there's always the issues of race and ethnicity, and that came through quite clearly in the music. It was actually quite difficult to find resources. At that point of time, music and composing music in Malaysia, in Singapore it was much more established, but in Malaysia it was not quite so. Basically, I couldn't even find a list of composers that I could contact. And so therefore I had to establish things from ground zero, basically, in Malaysia. In Singapore it was much easier to do that. There was this idea of exploring what is out there. What could we do? This was in the early 2000s, and sort of musicology is coming around to the idea of musicology in Australia, is coming around to the idea of new musicology, which is the idea behind accepting, I suppose, many students who had brave and bold and weird and quirky ideas on what kind of research in terms of music. And because it was explorative, there was really no set, prescribed thing that a student had to abide by, and which is, on one hand, rather scary. I spent my first year doing my PhD just exploring. While it was great, it could be at times rather frightening, because you don't really know where this darkness is going to end. But it was great. So there were Katrina Hunt doing music and dance in a society that make-believe society, and it was exciting work that she was doing. And I suppose mine falls within this framework of just exciting things that, we didn't know where we were going as a school. In terms of the musicology department, we didn't really know where we were going. And so that's how I suppose I was part of that. yeah, this room itself, that used to be Stephen's office, and this used to be the postgraduate kitchen. I remember when I was the first year or so, when I was doing my PhD, I used to have an office upstairs on the 6th floor, and at 10 o'clock the security guy used to come around, knock on my door, time to go home. I got really upset about that because I was a night worker. So at that time, the School of Music had then moved under the Faculty of Arts, and so I wrote to the person in charge, which eventually went up to the dean, and I think as a result we got the shed. So that was a plus, and I did that as the school representative, the postgraduate school representative, or something like that. And I was proud to say that I got us the shed, and we had 24-hour access to our offices, and we had comfortable accommodations for a while. I don't know what had happened to it, whether postgraduate students do have that space, but yeah, I'm proud of that.